Hey, Scott Gunther here. Here's a quick lesson on conducting research, because if you're in my class, you'll be conducting research soon. A quick lesson overview. We'll define what research is for you. I'll define for you what a research question is. I'll teach you how to find sources. We'll talk about how to evaluate different sources. We'll talk about how to cite those sources to give credit. And we'll talk about how to organize your information. All right, let's get after it. What is research? As you can tell by the Google Dictionary definition, it is a systematic investigation into and study of materials and sources in order to establish facts and reach new conclusions. Let's put that in a different way. This is any time you systematically, let's find a better word for that, purposefully look for answers to questions. Okay, so you have a question, whether it's about how to paint cars better or how to cure cancer, you are going to figure out ways to answer that question and find that answer with facts. You need a research question in order to research, or else you're just reading random things. When I was a kid, I used to like to read the encyclopedia for fun. That's not research, that's just reading, that's just fun. But for research, you have to have a question that guides and focuses you. So you need to go into that research with a question, and the goal is to find answers to that question. And your questions guide that process, right? So let's talk about how to define a research question. A research question needs to be clear. It needs to have enough specifics that without explaining too much, your audience can understand, right? So you wouldn't say just painting, you would say painting cars, but to be even more clear, you want to be focused, okay? So clear and focused, it's narrow enough that it can be answered thoroughly in the space. If it's too broad, like how to paint cars, then there's a lot of answers to that question. But maybe you want to talk about how to paint vintage muscle cars. Because it's a more narrow topic, you're more able to actually completely answer the question in the space of your assignment. Concise. So clear, focused, concise basically means short. It means it shouldn't be longer than like a sentence. As few words as possible. Complex. Okay, basically, you shouldn't answer it with a yes or no question. It actually requires a thing. So you don't want to say, should you paint cars? That's not complex enough. Arguable. This one will be a challenge for a lot of you. Arguable means that there are different answers to the question. And maybe, actually, even shouldn't we say maybe, definitely there's no one right answer. So when it comes to the best way to paint vintage cars, there might be one guy that says this, one guy that says that. You're not necessarily trying to find the ultimate answer. Rather, you're trying to find one answer, okay? And interesting. Well, interesting, that's up to you. What do you find interesting? If you are not interested in it, and if your topic bores you, that's your fault, not mine. Here's some examples of good and bad research questions. An unclear research question would be something like this. How should social networking sites address the harm they cause? Here's a more clear one. What action should social networking sites like MySpace and Facebook take to protect users' privacy and information? All right, why is this one more clear and concise? It actually names social media networks. You've never heard of MySpace. Let's put TikTok in there, right? And the harm they cause is too clear, so we've specified what that harm is, privacy and personal information. Here's another unfocused one. What is the effect of the environment from global warming? That's huge. What's the effect on the environment? Like, that's crazy. Here's more focused. What is the most significant effect of glacial melting on the lives of penguins in Antarctica? Okay, you can already see how that's more clear. We've identified a specific animal group, a specific location, and a specific aspect of global warming. How are doctors addressing diabetes? Again, way too broad. There are people who spend their whole lives writing books and books about this and not having answers, okay? So to make it more complex, you would say something like, what main environmental, behavior, and genetic factors predict whether Americans will develop diabetes, and how can these commonalities be used to aid the medical community in prevention of disease? I don't expect yours to be that fancy, but that one is complex because it's not just they're trying hard. It like actually has specific things they want to figure out. Finding sources. You all have magic devices that will find any information for you anywhere, and that's nuts. I used to have to go to the library because I'm an old man. So how do you find sources? Well, search engines are a great place to start. They're free, they're convenient, most of you know how to use them, but the problem with search engines is there's a lot of unreliable information. Google and Bing are like the main ones. There's also things called databases. They're like Google, but they're limited to good information. Databases are a collection of experts' opinions that they share with each other, and usually these are offered through schools or libraries. So they're basically search engines, but rather than searching everything, they search just more narrow things. Like you can't just go put something on this database. You have to get it published. Other people have to say it's okay. And that's how you know it's more reliable. Not that everything here is going to be right or true necessarily, but at least you'll have the guarantee that other experts say it's worth listening to. So databases are like Google for professional and more reliable and more scholarly and academic sources. Databases. Okay, here's some tips for using databases like Gale or EBSCO. Type topics and keywords. Don't type whole questions. So don't type your whole research question in there. Type in the word penguin, global warming. If what you're looking for isn't coming up, don't give up. Instead of typing penguin, say waterfowl. Like you got to find clever ways to reword it. And each time you reword some phrase of that, you'll come up with different things. Instead of reading the whole article, there's usually at the top of each article something called an abstract. That's like a short summary of what the article's about. Skim through that rather than reading the whole article. Filter things by date, and you want to try to find the things that are most recent. Because if you're reading about like computers and you're finding articles from 1972, might be dated, right? You might find articles about MySpace or something. And this is a skill. It takes practicing. How do you find out if a source is a good source or not? We all know there's a lot of biased and opinion-based and just false information on the internet. How do we figure out what is actually going to be reputable? Reputable means not necessarily that it's 100% always going to be true, but it means it's experts, okay? All right, how do you do this? Well, there's a little checklist we call the CRAP checklist. CRAP stands for currency. How current is it? Meaning, was it last year or 10 years ago? Relevance. Basically, does it actually relate to what you're talking about? It might be current, but if it's about trees instead of cars, it's not relevant, right? Authority. This is a big one. What are their credentials and qualifications? Are they really experts on this? Did they spend their entire lives and careers learning how to paint cars? Or did they read about it once on Reddit, right? Did they spend their entire lives researching something, or did they just listen to some podcast from some former wrestler, right? Accuracy. Basically, this one's an easy one to check. Are the things they're saying factually true? And you would be shocked at how many times things aren't. Purpose, meaning why did they publish this thing? Was it published by Coca-Cola? Ooh, that reminds me. And was it about sugar? Right? And if it's published by Coca-Cola, think they might be biased? Yeah. Citing sources. Citing means giving credit where credit is due, and you have to do it in a specific way. Research must be accompanied by citations because when people read it, they need to know where the information came from for two reasons. One, to avoid plagiarism. So I know you didn't just like write it yourself, rather that like these ideas came from someone else. And to give, it actually builds credibility. You might think, I don't want to quote someone else because I want it to be my words. But actually, when you quote like a scientist or a medical doctor, that is more reputable than saying, this one wrestler I read, right? All right, MLA citation format. At the end of each research paper, there's going to be something called a works cited page. And in the works cited page, it gives credit for all the things that you talked about. Cited means you put a page number next to it. Works means the thing that they wrote. Works cited means the things that you quoted in your essay. That's literally what it means. Things that you quoted. Works means things. Cited means that you quoted. A works cited page has a list of all the things that you quoted. And in this, it's going to have a list of the author's name, the thing they wrote, where that thing was published in a book or a magazine or in a journal, who else maybe helped write it, what version it was, who published it, what date, and where they published it. All that information is like an address for people like me, so we can go find it. An in-text citation. Okay, this is when you're actually typing up your essay, when you put the page number and author's name in there to show the reader, me, I'm your reader, where you got it from. So when you quote something, or even just refer to it, even if you're not quoting it, but you're like kind of referring to something that one doctor said, you can throw a little parenthesis in there. And that shows me that like, oh, they got that information from this source. So how do you do it? Well, here's some examples. This right here is a page number. You would only put just a page number if you're only citing one person. So if in your whole essay, you're just quoting one person, then you don't need to bother putting the last name there because there's only one person, right? But here in this example, you want to put a last name if you have more than one person you're quoting. So you find two things that people have said about how to paint cars, and one guy's name is Burke, okay? You would want to put his name here. Look at this. This is very important because all of you do this wrong. Quotation mark, blah, 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 quotation mark, parenthesis, name, number, parenthesis, period. Notice that the period is, after all that, and there's no period here. All right. How do you organize your information? Good question. Let's talk about it. Organize it from the start. Keep all your stuff together. You can do that in a Google Doc. You can do that in a Google Drive. You can do it with paper, but you want to keep track of everything, even if you don't think it's useful at the time, because later you might think, oh, where's that one source? I can't tell you how many times students have come to me and said, there was this one thing, but I don't know where I found it. So keep track of everything. Also, think outside the essay. This means that it doesn't just have to be an essay. There's different ways to present information. For example, there's a video like I'm giving you now. I could have written this all as an essay, but I decided to combine PowerPoint with a video, right? Or maybe you want to sketch it or do an interpretive dance of it. Do a lot of research. Now, I'm a photographer, and I know when I go take pictures of things, I'll go shoot 1,000 pictures, but only 10 of them are good. And that's the same way with research, where you want to research a bunch of stuff, and then maybe out of all that, it's like panning for gold, right? You're sifting through, there's a bunch of dirt in there, and you got to do it a lot to get just a few gold nuggets. And explain things simply. Don't try to pretend like you're fancier than you are. I hate thesauruses. Don't use it. If you have to use a thesaurus to find a word, you don't get to use that word. Only use words that you understand. So, basically, I know the word research is scary, but the main idea is research is just learning about something that's interesting to you. And it doesn't have to be about global warming, unless that interests you. It can be about painting cars. It can be about the origins of ballet. It can be about the best defensive schemas in basketball. It can be about the best kind of stain to use on a deck. I'm looking at my window. I have to stain my deck soon. Any of those things can be research questions, okay? So all research is finding answers to questions about things you're interested in. And there's my references because you're supposed to cite references, right? Okay. Thank you. Let me know if you have any questions.